Hello learners, welcome back to the course on learning and development in organization. We move to the next session where we'll be looking into an interesting thing. Mapping the external factors, messages, social cues. A very small discussion that we'll have today, but it will be very fruitful, especially considering psychological contracts in organization and their connection to learning and development. I am Dr. Cyril Issac. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Business, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. Now, when you look into mapping the external factors, typically, the underlying theme for today's discussion would be, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. So, this is the underlying philosophy that every individual should have when you venture into learning and development. So, let's understand the importance of mapping external factors, messages and social cues. So, cues are typically the ideas, the small triggers that you get from any source that initiates a certain behavioral pattern within you. So, when you look into the importance, it is all about ensuring a relevance and adaptability. It boosts the learner engagement, and 3, it reinforces organizational culture. Let's look into it in greater detail. When you're looking into the importance of mapping external factors, typically, please understand when you're talking about the relevance and adaptability factor, understanding external factors like, let's say, economic trends, or maybe sometimes the technology, the tech, or the regulations, help align training with real world demands. So, it keeps content current, it keeps it meaningful, and it keeps responsive content to change. Responsiveness to change is also a critical aspect. When you look into the learner engagement, it boosts learner engagement typically where you have clear targeted messages that resonate more with learners, while well-paced social cues like visual or auditory prompts enhance the motivation, focus and information retention. And finally, when you're looking into the organizational culture per se, it reinforces organizational culture, messages and cues that can reflect the company values, let's say. The company values promote inclusivity and support psychological safety. This alignment strengthens both the learning environment and the workplace culture. Now, when you are looking into the importance, we also see that strategic and agile design is also necessary. Mapping creates a big picture view, helping L&D teams design cohesive programs and respond quickly to shifts in the business or the learner needs or requirements. And finally, you have improvement in learning outcomes and typically the ROI. Engaged learners are more likely to complete training and apply what they have learned. So, mapping also allows continuous improvement through data and feedback, maximizing the impact that is there or that is required. Now, let's look into the external factors. External factors are macro and micro environmental influences that affect how organizations approach learning. So, when you look into these external factors, they originate outside the organization. That's why the term external, or they also originate outside the learning system, but have a direct or indirect impact on how learning is designed, delivered and received. So, they shape strategic decisions, learner expectations and organizational priorities. So, these factors are often beyond the control of the L&D team, but understanding and responding to them is vital for creating effective, timely and relevant learning experiences. Now, when you look into the types of external factors, you see that there are 2 possibilities. One is economic conditions. Budget constraints during a recession might limit the scope of training or necessitating cost-effective digital learning solutions. Conversely, during, let's say, economic expansion or a situation of economic expansion, Organizations may invest heavily in upskilling and leadership development. When you look into the second type of external factor, it is technology. The rise of AI, virtual reality, or mobile learning platforms shapes the modes and tools of training delivery. L&D teams must stay ahead of tech trends to provide relevant future-ready content. When we look into the types of external factors, we also see legislative and political context. Regulatory compliance, such as let's say the GDPR or OSHAs, they require mandatory training modules. So political shifts might influence, let's say, workforce priorities, such as sustainability or maybe the DEI, diversity training, etc. When you look into other types of external factors, you have social and cultural factors or cultural trends, increasing awareness of diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI. Many a time I also say that we say it as DEIB. Now we also tend to include inclusion and belongingness. So when we look into this social and cultural trends, increasing awareness of DEIB influences training focus. Similarly, generational shifts in workforce may demand more gamification or let me put it like bit-sized learning formats to meet evolving learner expectations. Now, when you look into the impact on organizations, I should say that external factors form the operating landscape for learning and development, setting constraints and also opportunities. First thing that I can think of is legal mandate. When you look into legal mandates, they can necessitate regular training refreshers, be it in cybersecurity or awareness in data sensitive industries. One could be that, another could be the technological disruptions. Technological disruptions may prompt the rollout of new skill building pathways in areas like data literacy or digital collaboration. We can also have cultural shifts. Cultural shifts like remote work normalizations, what we have now, or may require rethinking team dynamics and leadership training. Now let's look into messages after external factors. When you're looking into messages, typically, messages serve as the bridge between instructional content and learner engagement. So the way information is presented can determine how it is perceived, processed and the most important thing, retained. So this is vital when we look into learning and development within organization. Now let's look into the key components of effective messaging. Needless to say, the first and the foremost one obviously would be clarity. The information must be digestible. Avoid jargon and aim for simple, actionable language, especially in compliance or technical training. The second important aspect could be relevance. Personalization increases learner buy-in. Align messaging with the learner's role, goals and pain points. Let's take an example. Here's how this skill helps you in your current project. So that sets the relevance part. Another significant aspect or component would be tone and style. Match tone with organizational voice and learner demographics. So a professional yet friendly tone works well in leadership training. While if you ask me, informal, energetic messaging may suit sales onboarding. Now let's look into some practical examples under the messages. Let's say using visual metaphors or icons like light bulbs or ideas or shields for security to reinforce the concept could actually be very important and could make a big difference. Include storytelling or learner testimonials to humanize the abstract content. So that also could be one of the finest way. Most of the B school today adopts the storytelling method in the pedagogy. You look into embedding micro messages throughout the learning journey, such as let's say pop-up reminders or encouragement or feedback nudges. All these ask some of the practical examples of the messages. Now, let's look into the third element, social cues. What are social cues? I have already given an introduction to that in the first slide itself, but to go in detail, social cues are often subtle. Yet, they powerfully shape learning experiences by tapping into human instincts for recognition, for affiliation and emotional resonance particularly. So, when you are looking into the social cues, the different types are visual cues, use of imagery, icons or color-coded alerts. It could be like, let's say, something like green for success, or let's say red for error. These are visual cues specifically. This visual cues enhances the cognition. There is no doubt about it. It is research proved, it is empirically investigated that visual cues enhances the cognitive processing. The second important type would be auditory cues. Let's say some background musics or notification sounds or voiceovers can stimulate mood and attention. An example could be, let's say, a calming audio during reflection exercise, or let's say some energizing beats in group challenges. All these can enhance the learning curve. All these can enhance the learning effectively. The third important aspect is contextual cues. The learning setup, whether virtual breakout rooms or physical setting arrangements, can guide collaboration or competition. And finally, we have olfactory cues as another significant types of social cues. While less common in digital settings, smell can be powerful in experiential or interperson workshops. Let's take an example, using lavender for relaxation during the wellness training can be a very good example. Now, let's look into the application of all these aspects in learning and development, which is the crux of today's discussion. Creating immersive learning simulations. Let me repeat it. Immersive learning simulations, ladies and gentlemen, that include ambient sounds and realistic visuals is what we are looking into when we are talking about the applications of this in L&D. Designing team-based challenges to foster cooperation and peer accountability. Setting up environmental nudges. Environmental nudges means inspirational quotes and LMS dashboards, something like that, to reinforce the learning mindset. We also try to map the interplay through a strategic framework. Now, mapping these elements allows organizations to create a systems-based approach to L&D, aligning the environmental inputs with internal learning strategies. So, if we go by step-by-step mapping process, we start with analyzing the external factors. Conduct a personal analysis, political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental analysis. Identify the key external drivers of learning. Example, let's say industry trends or customer expectations. The second aspect would be to craft effective messaging. Align the message design with learner personas. Use A or B testing to fine-tune the message clarity and the engagement typically. The third important aspect would be to leverage the social cues strategically. Curate the learning spaces, be it physical, be it digital. Curate the learning spaces that supports focus and psychological safety. Use gamified elements to signal progression, status or peer comparison. And finally, evaluate the impact continuously. Use feedback loops, engagement analytics or even behavioral metrics to assess the effectiveness of each layer. Adjust the course content, communication tone or sensory inputs based on real-time data. So, mapping and integrating external factors, messages and social cues allows L&D professionals to build learning experiences that are not only effective but deeply resonant and, I would say, adaptive. So, by taking a holistic view of the learner's environment and designing with intention, organizations can foster more engaged, informed and agile workforces ready to meet the typical challenges of the dynamic world. So if you are asking me what this discussion was all about, was all with respect to the context of learning and development. Many a time we would give the employees the right content, the right training delivery, the right trainer or the right learning environment. But if we are not ready to create a conducive working environment to actually make use of the learning that they have done or that they have gained or gathered, it is futile. So when you are looking into all the external factors, the messages, the social cues, what is significant is the approach towards the knowledge dissemination that should happen within the environment. So that's why many of the organizations have professional circles, some professional weekdays or some knowledge exchange sessions. All this in different names and different nomenclatures, but the underlying idea is that whatever you are gaining, whatever you are learning should be for the development of the entire workforce within the organization. And this is specifically how knowledge becomes power. So when you talk about knowledge being power, knowledge becomes power only and only when it is shared. Thank you for listening to me patiently. See you with more details of learning and development in the next class. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.